driving home, red and blue lights flash behind you, your stomach tightens, right? And in the next 5 minutes, everything you say or don't say can decide whether you go home or if you leave in them handcuffs, right? You think, I'm gonna be polite, I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna cooperate, everything gonna be fine. But here's the thing that most Texans don't realize: a DWI stop is not about fairness. It's about building a case, right? Tonight, I'm going to show you the exact tricks officers use during DWI stops, why perfectly sober people get arrested every day, and how one wrong answer can cost you your license, your money, your freedom. Now, I want you to stay with me because the most dangerous part of a DWI stop isn't the breath test, it's the conversations before it. Okay, I'm Ruben Restrepo. I'm a Texas DWI criminal defense attorney, and I defend people accused of DWI across the state. I've reviewed hundreds of traffic stops, body cameras, dash cams, police reports, and I can tell you this: most DWI cases are won or lost on the side of the road. In the next few minutes, you're going to learn what officers are really looking for, how nervousness gets used against you, whether you should cooperate or refuse, and why an officer's opinion can matter more than the evidence. And the most important part comes at the end. All right. So let's start with this: you cannot ignore the officer. You must provide identification and follow lawful orders. The number one thing you must provide is identification. Your driver's license is a must. What's that, you say? You don't have a driver's license? Oh, well, I predict there's going to be some mean comments about that. Since you don't have a driver's license, you still have to produce identification. So provide your Texas ID, your passport, your matricular card. What's that, you say? You lost your physical copy. Okay, well, at least provide a photo ID and let the officer know that you lost it. It's time to get the replacement, okay? You also must provide your proof of insurance. If you do not have insurance, then get ready for a ticket at minimum. No one that is driving without a license should drive without insurance. That is like asking an officer not to like you. So make sure that you get some insurance. If you sell car insurance, tell us in the comments. Put it in the chat section, all right? So ID and insurance, that's the minimum required for compliance. But complying does not mean volunteering information. Silence is not guilt. Silence is protection. Now, don't argue with the officer, all right? Arguing feels justified, but on camera, it just looks like aggression, confusion, impairment. I know you think that they were being unfair, that you weren't speeding, you didn't put on the signal light on. You did put your signal light on. What are we talking about here, right? Fight that in court. Better to move on with a ticket. You're emotional, you're stressed, your adrenaline is pumping. Take a deep breath, stay calm, cool, and collected. You don't trust the popo? Your past negative experience can create a new negative experience. You don't think that you think you can explain your way out of it because you know the law? Well, you can be right and arrested. You just you just got to be in charge. Well, the officer's in charge. I've seen sober drivers talk themselves into an arrest just by trying to explain. Here's something critical you need to understand: drinking is not illegal. All right? Driving after drinking is not automatically illegal. Okay, so what do we mean by that? What we mean is people are drinking. We got parking lots at restaurants that serve alcohol. We got parking lots at bars. So drinking and driving is not illegal. Driving while intoxicated, that's the illegal part. right? So in Texas, the state must prove intoxication, meaning a loss of normal mental or physical faculties. And during a traffic stop, officers are not proven intoxication yet. They're building it. That is why this question is so dangerous. Have you had anything to drink? If you say yes, even one beer, that investigation escalates immediately. I hear it all the time. I just had 2 beers. Well, 2 beers on a short, tiny person can mean intoxication. So they can use that fact to build their case. Field tests begin. The report writes itself. If you say no and alcohol is later detected, they're just going to say you lied and you were trying to cover up. That's why most lawyers say this: you don't got to answer that question. I hope you're noticing a pattern here. Next, officers. They're looking for physical signs of intoxication. You see, officers have to write down everything, why they moved on from a traffic stop to a sobriety test. Don't get me wrong, plenty of people have been arrested and charged without signs of intoxication. Lawyers use missing information to show illegal arrests all the time, but most times officers are going to follow the training. So that's what we're talking about here: bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, balance issues, odor of alcohol. They're going to use all this stuff. This is called reasonable suspicion to investigate possible driving while intoxicated. Remember that this is a low burden and it just allows them to keep you there. Bloodshot eyes, I have several clients that have that as a baseline. Or think about most of the time when people are getting pulled over, it's nighttime, they're tired. Slurred speech, please. People who are not from the South always talk about how Southern accents sound a little bit like people are intoxicated. Balance issues? Yeah, right. I watched that video. It's contrary to what you said in your statement, sir. Order of alcohol? I don't have a smellometer to verify that. So, yeah, they will use these claims, but fatigue, allergies, contact lenses, even uneven pavement, those all look the same on paper. Now, let's get to mental signs, right? Confusion, slow responses, forgetfulness, nervousness. Here's what most people don't realize: being nervous during a traffic stop is normal, but normal gets written down as impairment. I had a client completely sober, hands shaking, voice cracking. Yes, officer. Okay. Why? It was his first traffic stop. The officer wrote down extreme nervousness, inconsistent with a normal stop. Oh, that sentence justified the arrest. I was like, excuse me? Even the officer had secondhand embarrassment when I pointed that out. What they should be looking for are clear examples, like giving a debit card instead of a license, unable to give their name, I don't know my name, falling asleep while being questioned, unable to wake up. Hello. The reality is, I do represent people who are genuinely intoxicated, which is why it's frustrating when I see people who are arrested when they're not intoxicated. Now, let's talk about the field sobriety test, right? This next part is where people really get into trouble. Field sobriety tests are voluntary in Texas. They aren't scientific, they are subjective. They are designed to make you fail because it's all about the points. You're being judged performing unfamiliar tasks, usually at night, on the side of a road with cars passing by. Meow, meow, meow. If you refuse that field sobriety test, you're still going to be arrested. Here's the key: they lose the evidence. They can't use that against you. They can only say, oh, well, we ain't got it. No video of you stumbling, no poor performance to replay in court. Refusal is not guilt. It's a legal decision. Now, physical limitations matter, right? Bad knees, back problems, inner ear issues, anxiety. Yeah. Field tests do not account for real bodies. If you choose to cooperate, say it clearly. I'm real nervous. I have physical limitations. My knees hurt. I got a bad hip. that matters later. Now let's talk about portable breath tests, right? They have this little handheld device. You don't have to take that. It's a screening tool, right? A lot of times when they're using it, it's because they can't get the clues together. I say refuse this because the results, they're always skewed. Case law doesn't allow the results to be used or even mentioned, but the results can be used to move the case forward. I once had a client blow into the machine and it showed double the legal limit. The prosecutors kept bringing it up. Well, this result was above the legal limit, above 0.15, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? Not enough time had passed because when we got the real results, it was less than the legal limit. So tell me how that works, right? But taking one often guarantees that you're about to get arrested. And here's where everything comes together. In court, juries are going to hear one phrase first. Based on my training and experience, the officer's opinion matters. Every DWI trial I go to, the prosecutor must tell me the experts they're going to use. Experts make you think about like scientists, right? But instead, the officers are treated as experts in arresting and sobriety tests, and they will give an expert opinion. And that opinion is built from everything you say and do during the stop. So remember this, a DWI stop is not about helping you. It's not about letting you go home. It's about documenting you. Now, I want to hear from you. I want you to drop your questions in the chat because some of the most important insights always come from real situations. All right? If you or someone you care about is facing a DWI in Texas, don't guess your way through it. Use the link in the description. I'm going to put one in the comments. First thing, schedule a consultation with me. We're going to talk in my office. We'll talk over the phone. It's just going to be me and you. All right? The earlier you exercise your options, the better. If this has helped you, subscribe. Don't miss out any more videos. I'm doing lives pretty much Monday through Thursday. And I am here for you guys. So I want you guys to stay safe out there. And I want you to look at my other videos. I have a lot of questions about Texas open carry. So guys, I want you guys to watch out for that video that came in the past. And I want you to look at that. All right. Now, let's see what we got going on right here. All right. So somebody asked me, have you ever restored a felon's right to carry or to vote? No. As far as the voting thing, I think some people are allowed to vote. It just depends on the state. Uh, if you have a felony, generally what you need is some sort of pardon to remove that felony. Okay. There's not much that we can do in terms of Second Amendment rights. And, it's always going to be on your record and it can be used to enhance. They don't really want to get rid of the felonies because if you mess up later on, they want to be able to use it against you, right? Especially if it's something like a DWI. Does Texas have the red flag law? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. Let me see what it says. Red flag law. Okay, so I would say no. Texas does not have that. We've actually advanced stuff to get rid of these red flags. Texas is really about allowing people to have guns, right? Obviously, there's a lot of bad stuff that's going on, school shootings and just regular shootings, assassinations, right? But there's 25 million people in Texas, and probably more than that now. And just so many of them have guns. They use it for hunting, collection purposes. They go to the gun range. So it's there's just so many people that they don't even have any kind of experience with it except when they see it on the news. So that they just don't have that same type of sympathy that other places have. So yeah, Texas kind of does get rid of a lot of that stuff. There is a loophole because you're supposed to be prevented from buying a gun, and even if you're a felon, right? But if you're buying it from someone else, there's nothing that says that that person has to check out if you are eligible to do it or not. It's just plain and simple, maybe, maybe not. So it's kind of it's a big loophole, and actually a lot of felons get into trouble because they're like, "Oh, I was able to buy a gun." Sometimes they go to gun shows, and the gun shows it does not nothing shows up, and then they buy the gun, and then they get into trouble. Yes, I do like Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of people like to say it's better to conceal than open carry. I mean, it's just a personal choice. I definitely understand where people are coming from. It's just pretty much a personal choice. Um, Would a fanny pack be good enough to be considered as a holster? No, it has to be a fanny pack is essentially like a purse. Now, if it's in the fanny pack, it's concealed. So that's a different story, right? But then the moment that you take it out, if you're not using it, right, and other people can see it, if the police can see it, now all of a sudden that's going to be in plain view. Or if you have the fanny pack and you took it off and you put it in your car, maybe on the front passenger seat, and it was zipped open and the gun is viewable, that is now in plain view. The moment I can see that gun and it's not in a holster, it can be used against you. All right. So got to be careful about that stuff. Actually, let me see something here. Da, da, da. Get a shareable link. Want to let these people know that I answered their question. That's right. You can have a gun in your vehicle, but it has to be in a holster. That is completely true. Um, And, I think a lot of times people get confused about the whole situation, right? Because they're like, well, if it's not visible, then I'm not breaking the law. That's very true. But I like to give this one scenario that I have seen before: gun in a glove compartment, completely out of plain view, right? But the person had to go into the glove compartment to get documentation. The moment they did that, officer sees the gun, it's not in a holster, right? So they see the gun, they know what's going on, and they reacted, right? Now, in this particular deal, the officers weren't about pulling out their guns or anything. What they ended up happening is that everything progressed. The person was arrested. The glove box was open. Gun is in there. Another thing that happens a lot is that a gun is in a car, not in a holster, right? And they have to do an inventory search. Well, if it's not locked away, if it's just like underneath the seat, that will be viewed as in plain view, even though it's not plain view. If it's in plain view of a search, then it will be there, right? So a lot of people get that mixed up. Okay. This person had a DWI 2014, but every time they try to buy, they get denied, and they go through an appeal, and it makes them um, very angry. I completely understand. You have to appeal because you actually it's not a felony. There's no reason to deny you, but then they end up denying you. So you can't really get around that. I mean, other than like you buying a gun at a maybe a gun show and then it's not going to show up there. But yeah, you can open carry because you're not. I mean, unless based on what you're showing me, you're not prevented from owning a gun. Now they can't. No one can charge you even on federal level. So I'm not entirely sure what the issue is there. Now, usually what happens is that there's an extra bit and that people don't understand and then they're not explaining. So that could be it as well. My weapon is in a holster on me or my lockbox. Is this legal? Yeah, most definitely. Okay. Do, do, do. Why would a person have a gun in the car that's not his? I'd be very suspicious if I were a cop. So you're saying in Texas that's allowed? I'm saying in everywhere it's just pretty normal, right? If I a lot of times it's very difficult for people to understand, right? Because the culture might not be Texas pretty much has a gun culture. And so when you have a gun culture, what ends up happening is that lots of people own guns, right? They own legal guns. It's not a gun that's used in the wire or trying to kill people and abandoned somewhere. It's just a legal gun and they usually keep it in their car. But we don't more people have guns than cars, right? Like it's kind of a little bit more normal. Why? Because a gun is going to be maybe $600, $300 depending on what you have. A car, we're talking thousands of dollars, right? A lot of people are trying to buy cars and they actually get into trouble because they're trying to buy a car off of like Facebook Marketplace. Then they find out later that the car was a stolen vehicle, right? But it's very difficult to have a car. So you're always borrowing a car from somebody and then you're driving around. You don't even realize that the gun is in there because you're just trying to go to the grocery store, come back, cop pulls you over. Oh my gosh, there's a gun here. They're not going to believe you. Just like you said, it's going to seem suspicious. It's suspicious to the cop too. That's why the person got arrested. And then the attorney, like me, what do I have to do? I have to figure out who does that gun belong to? Then get something from that person. Sometimes it's a bit risky, right? Because if the prosecutor feels cheated, a lot of times they can go after that person and say, well, it wasn't in a holster. You left it out in plain view and not in a holster. So that's a violation as well. Now, most prosecutors will not do that stuff. But, I mean, sometimes people own a gun and like I gave the example, I have multiple people who I've interacted with that they were felons that owned a gun, right? And so, what are we talking about here? Why is there a gun and they're felons? They just don't even know the law, right? But ignorance of the law doesn't excuse you of the law. And so, they have to write something, even though they're felons, in order to get their friend off. And if they don't feel like they're going to do it, oh my gosh, that's really tough for my case, right? Especially if my person is a felon who's now in possession of that. But, once I kind of know that, there are tricks to get that information, right? Get an investigator, see, where's this gun was purchased, things of that nature. And so once it becomes clear to the prosecutor, usually I can get rid of those cases. Okay. Da, da, da. What about license concealed carry while driving? I mean, just because you have a license doesn't mean that you cannot follow the law. It doesn't like give you an extra deal. It just allows you to do more. And you're actually saying you are a responsible gun owner. There are certain places where you can go as a concealed license holder and do more, right? As a security guard can do more, have guns places in more places than a regular citizen. So that's kind of what the purpose of that is for. So, I mean, just based on what you're saying, I don't think there's anything that's illegal about that. Okay. Been stopped. Open carry, always have gun on my side. Cop walk up to my window. First thing to do is let them know they have a firearm. Live in Texas. One of the rules I do have a license to have a handgun, and I also have a license. I'm a commissioned security guard and never had a problem with them on the job or not. What I would say is a lot of people like to say, well, I've always told them and I never had any problems. The issue tends to be like, where are you living? Right? Texas is a pretty big state. Once they start finding out you're a security guard, all suspicion will leave, right? So it's everybody's in a different position. You don't have to tell them that you have that, but you have a license. So you probably do have to tell them that you have that. But regular people don't have to say that they have that. It's a traffic stop. You should not be getting out of the car. There is actual Supreme Court law that says very simple. When you get pulled over for a traffic stop, it should be focused on the traffic stop to get you in and out and back on the road. Of course, there's going to be situations where you're not going to get in and out and back on the road because of something extra. But there's so many tickets out there. We know the normal version, and cops should not be trying to inquire. Do you have any guns? Do you have any drugs? I thought you pulled me over because I was speeding. I don't have to answer any of those questions, right? Why are they asking these questions? It's literally illegal for them to ask the questions, but they're going to arrest you anyways once they find out the information. Once you start asking those questions, hey, wait a minute. I thought we were, I thought you pulled me over for speeding. Okay, well, I'm just going to be quiet then. Just give me my ticket so I can go. We don't need to be getting into all kind of situations. A police officer literally did that. The person didn't want to answer any questions. What did they do? They kept the person there while another canine unit came, searched the car. They found something, right? Charged the person. It all got thrown out. Why? Because they didn't have a right to keep them there beyond the time it takes to take the ticket. Now, you might think, okay, well, then why did I get stopped for a DWI, like you just said earlier, Ruben? And they were able to ask me about my alcoholic drinking. Well, that's because they can smell the alcohol, right? Remember, I can't verify it. I don't have a smellometer to say whether or not they actually truly smelled it, but that's the excuse that they're going to use. Also, the different other factors, right? Your eyes, the way that your southern drawl sounds like your um and a slurred speech. These things, they're going to be put together and they're going to be used as the justification to further along and essentially stop the traffic citation investigation and move to a DWI investigation. Does that make sense? I hope so. All right. I appreciate everybody that's watching this. If you have any other questions, reach out to me. I'm trying to answer a bunch of the questions that's on the chat, a bunch of the questions that's in other places. I appreciate you. Bye bye. And end stream.